up. All right, good morning, everybody. How are we doing? Who was up for the 3 o'clock balloon ride over the valley? Anybody make that? It was amazing. You should have been there. My name is Colin Bodell. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Time Incorporated, a position I've held now for 4 months and 14 days. Not like I'm counting. And the interesting thing about this event, you notice all of the panel sessions, all of the interviewing is done by Fortune editors, by journalists, by people who really, for a living, ask questions, deep, insightful questions. So, what's an engineer doing standing up here? Well, first of all, I appreciate the rookie opportunity to come and talk to the audience. We'll see how it works out. But STEM, deeply passionate, an enthusiastic interest of mine. Both my kids, my daughter's just graduated with an engineering degree, mechanical engineering focus, and my son is studying computer science. And I've been plugged in and doing what I can to help drive STEM across the United States and also around the world. I'm joined by people that, well, I was going to say John almost needs no introduction because you've just spent 30 minutes listening to him, but John Chambers, Chairman and CEO of Cisco. Next to him, Clara, Shih, who has a very interesting background that we'll get into when we talk about education. But Clara is the founder and CEO of Hearsay Social. She's on the board of directors for Starbucks. If you like your coffee in the morning, Clara is the right person to go and talk to about that. She was also named to Fortune's most powerful women entrepreneurs, which is really nice for us to have her on that basis. And she's also got a Master's of Computer Science from Stanford University. You came out first in your class. So I think she also, scales mountains, just for pleasure in the morning, leaps over large buildings. So we're great to have Clara with us. And then Maria Klawe. Maria is the president of Harvey College down in Claremont, California, where my daughter graduated from just a couple of months ago. So Maria and I go way back. And before that, Maria was the dean of engineering at Princeton. And then before that, University of Toronto. You were at IBM for a bunch of times. You got a PhD in mathematics. So you know a little bit about education, especially about STEM education. So one thing that I want to do just to kick off is I want to say no platitudes. I want to stipulate that we understand the value, the benefit of STEM education. And certainly for the vast majority of people in this room, hiring highly qualified CS majors, hiring highly qualified engineering majors is really important. And we shouldn't conflate STEM with all of the science disciplines. Yes, biology, chemistry, what have you, very important. But our particular focus, I think, at this time is computer science and engineering. That's where we have some of the largest challenges in the world, certainly in the country. So I want to stipulate that STEM is incredibly valuable for a growing, productive society, not just in the US, but also worldwide. And there's these great pockets of success, and we're going to talk about some of them over the next few minutes. But of these pockets of success, on the counter side of it, we also see very little going on. I see companies perhaps getting involved in STEM and promoting STEM education almost as a PR stunt. I don't mean to insult anybody, but I see elements of that. And what I really want to dig into with the panel today is understanding a little bit about where they've had individual successes, either individual or with their organizations or businesses, and what we can all be doing more to get everybody else on the same page and doing an awful lot better. So to start off, and I'll finally sit down now, I wanted to start off with Maria. So 2014, class of 2014, you graduated more women with engineering degrees than you did with men. Class of 2014, even the intake was more women than men. I'm interested in, how you managed to achieve that. That's the story about that. But then, how you're able to influence or what you're doing to influence your peer organizations, the other universities that are only graduating, low double digits of computer science and engineering majors.
Thanks, Colin. So the first thing I want to say is I did all of it just myself.
Of course you did.
Nobody helped. Well, the reality, of course, is that the hard work is really done by our faculty and by our admissions folks. So when I arrived 8 years ago, we were in the low 30% female for the population as a whole. and we were about 10% female in our CS major. We were doing a lot better in engineering. We were about 27% female in our engineering degree, so almost up to the level. And in 8 years, as Colin pointed out, we've managed to get up to overall about 46% female in the student body. We did have that one class of 2014 that came in at 51.5% female, but in our engineering class that just graduated, 56% female. I'll bet it's never been done by anyone other than maybe Smith College.
Right, and never say it'll never be done again, because we've got to make sure it's
done again. Oh no,
it
is going to be done again for sure. So let me talk about the things we did that changed stuff. So the first thing is just in admission. We made sure that all of our recruiting materials showed as many females as males. For the first 4 years, I wrote a handwritten card to every admitted female student, so it was about 300 a year, until we got our yield for female students up. We made sure that there are as many females as males as tour guides. We've now close to 40% of our faculty are female. So we just made it really clear that being a female engineer, physicist, mathematician, computer scientist, that's normal, okay? So I mean, we made the appearance of that. Then what we did was we made sure that in our introductory classes for engineering and computer science, rather than framing it as, learn to be an engineer who's going to be this tough guy, we framed it as creative problem solving. And same for computer science. Instead of making it seem as though it was, you know, learn to program in Java or some other language, it's creative problem solving. And there's very few young women I have encountered, and I would venture this applies to your daughter Emma and to Clara, who's young compared to me.
I thought I was young in general.
Now let's be careful about age discrimination.
Okay, okay. Now, you know, you might be slightly older than Emma, just graduated,
yeah,
but you are young in general, only slightly older. I have yet to meet a young person who doesn't want to be creative and who doesn't like problem solving. I mean, so we started by making sure that their first experience is one that's highly encouraging, that's really interesting, and where you believe that you can make a difference in the world with what you're learning. And then we just continued that through the next courses they make. So it's not that you have a young woman or an African-American student or a Latino, Latina take their first engineering class or their first CS class and say, oh my God, I'm going to be an engineer or a computer scientist. It doesn't work that way. You give them a great experience and you persuade them to take the next one. And you make that a great experience. And by the time they've taken a third one and they're really loving it, they're going like, I guess I could do that.
So these are all little incremental steps.
They're little things.
And they're easy as well.
They're easy. So I just want to mention that there are a number of, not to give Harvey Mudd all the credit, though Harvey Mudd, of course, deserves all the credit, but just to mention that there are other institutions. Stanford, for example, was also at 10%, and I believe they graduated 24% in last year's class. And that's up in like 3 years. MIT is up at 30%. In 36% in EECS, 30% in computer science. So that tells you the EE is quite a bit higher.
Right.
You know, the University of Washington, large public research institution with a fabulous computer science department, they're up above 30% in
But right the way across the United States, 57% of US graduates are women, and yet only 13% in computer science.
Yep.
So if it's so easy, why isn't everybody else doing it? Because clearly the demand is out there for CS majors, for engineering majors. Why aren't other schools doing it? And you know, what can we do to help them? What can you and others help to drive that?
So next Tuesday, I'm talking at the Snowbird Conference, which is the conference that brings together chairs of computer science departments from all across the country and Canada as well. And I have a 1.5-hour plenary to lay it out to say, you know, it's really up to us to do it. It's not hard to do. Every single institution that has put the effort in has seen success. Institutions are different, so why aren't they doing it? I think there's a couple of things. One is there's a lot of departments that believe it's not possible. They just say, oh, Carnegie Mellon can do it because they admit to computer science, and Stanford can do it, and MIT can do it. But, you know, in our situation, we can't. So we've got to be able to convince them. But the other thing is, computer science departments are dealing with a huge influx. I mean, tripling in the number of students wanting to major in computer science over the last 5 years. So industry, that's many of you out there, I'm going to be telling them next Tuesday that if a department is willing to step up and say, I'm going to work on this, you're going to be willing to invest money in helping them do it. So raise your hand if when I call you and ask you to help a university do it, you're going to put money into this. Come on, I want to see more hands.
And we're
more hands. Come on.
taking names if you don't raise your hand.
Thank you.
So, you know, from a university perspective, you're doing a lot. You're driving an awful lot. From a business perspective, John, you know, Cisco Networking Academy, you know, by any measure has been a tremendous success. 10,000 locations, 165 countries, 1 million students going through it, you know, on an annual basis, focused on, you know, secure technology and technological networks. Plans to, you know, well, first of all, tell us a little bit about how that came about, but also plans to branch out, you know, clearly, you know, given your business, you know, networking and security around that's important, but plans or thoughts about branching out into other CS disciplines, and likewise, other companies that are not getting as engaged as deeply as your company. Sure. You know, what should they be doing and how can we drive them more aggressively?
All right, so maybe 2 or 3 key takeaways. First is to really change STEM in this country or around the world, you're going to have to remove the needle. And you're going to have to take good ideas like what Maria just talked about, and I'm sure Clara has similar ideas, and then take them and do them on scale. So people that doubt that you can do things on scale, our network academies has graduated 5 million people through the programs. 92% of the people use that skills every day, get higher paying jobs, as you said, in 165 countries around the world. Taking those concepts, as we were talking to one of your colleagues, what we did after the terrible hurricane in Mississippi and Louisiana, went in and helped redo the education. In a public-private partnership down there, $90 million invested, and made tremendous progress. When the earthquake happened in Sichuan province, in an Appalachia-type area where 85,000 people died, 375,000 people were seriously injured, we went in and helped to redo, in partnership with the local governments and local citizens, both the education and the healthcare system.
Now, you don't get an immediate business return on that, immediate. So why, you know, what are the key reasons you do it?
Well, first, because it's just right.
Okay.
If you watch what our charter is, one of the things that we've been consistent on is our culture. We intend to change the way the world works, lives, learns, and plays, want to do the right thing, and we believe that technology can be the great equalizer in life. But it also, there's a one-to-one correlation, in my opinion, between how good a corporate social responsibility you do and business results. We've won every major award in this country around the world on corporate social responsibility. We just happen to be #1 in almost every one of those countries.
So you're not just talking about it, you're getting out there and doing it.
Do it, but the key takeaways are you've got to do it on scale, and you've got to take good ideas and then see how you do it in mass. We have $17 billion spent in this country by government programs for retraining our adults to get new jobs, the majority of which is not being spent effectively. You've got to say, how do you really prepare people for where the jobs are? How do you match the jobs to the skill sets, et cetera? And the most important takeaway, my third one would be, you've got to re-transform education. K through 12 is broken. We've got to realize that. You've got to disrupt this country. You've got to use social networking capabilities, video capabilities, a lot like my 2-year-old granddaughter can operate the Apple iPad better than I can. So there is not an issue on gender or skills if we just take advantage of this next generation.
Right, and you're standing up and effectively being counted as a business doing that. Mm-hmm. What are you doing, you know, to influence government, influence, you know, broader society? We've
been on this one for 20 years, including whether it's as simple as a change in taxation in California so that we could get school bond issues through, or interfacing to this government and other governments around the world on how they change their education system. It is interesting. A lot of the emerging markets are going to skip past us. They're not only going to graduate 600,000 engineers in India this year or China, you're going to see this occur in many other countries around the world because they understand the value of STEM. But the other key takeaway is when you look at OECD and their survey that just came out, they said there are 2 areas American adults are behind on: STEM and using IT to solve problems. The second one should be one we lead in.
Right.
And so we ought to really get our act together and say, if you believe in the Internet of Things, what I just talked about, et cetera, we ought to be training this next generation on how to use IT to really solve their problems and lead on a global basis with job creation.
Absolutely. And we'll come back to what the world should look like in the future. Clara, I want to go to you. You're a you're a product of engineering education. You came to the United States at 4 years old from Hong Kong. And I'm just realizing you got a Brit, you got a Hong Kongian, you got a Canadian sitting on the panel. Sorry, John.
West Virginia.
Okay, which is in itself another country. I mean, let's face it.
Careful, careful, Colin.
So Clara, you went to
Very proud.
I got to get this right. The Illinois Math and Science Academy, which I presume is focused on math and science and engineering disciplines. How much? I mean, we don't have the A/B test because you didn't get educated anywhere else in parallel unless you got a twin sister or a clone. But to what extent? How did you get into that program, and to what extent did it really shape how your career evolved? And also, what would you recommend to young ladies, young boys, that are thinking about wanting to stick with STEM?
I agree with Maria. It's not just one thing that's going to change this. And for me, I think it started with my father, who is an electrical engineer. And I remember being 6 years old and learning assembly language just around the kitchen table. So it's these building blocks, and it's forming your identity and realizing that STEM can be part of that and not be at odds with being a woman or a minority or whatever, name your other attributes. And so for me, I think I had this interest that was cultivated at an early age by my parents. And then, yes, I went to IMSA. It's a public boarding math and science magnet school. It's amazing.
What was the breakdown of boys and girls in that school?
Well, by design, they wanted to structure the school, because it's a public school, to reflect the residents of the state of Illinois. So it was 50-50 men and women, and it was mandatory residential, and then even the heritage, the ethnic breakdown also reflected the state of Illinois. So it's a very diverse school, and if you came in with less of the building blocks that Maria talked about, then you could participate in remedial summer programs. And by and large, I mean, everyone it wasn't uncool to be in STEM because everyone did it.
And did you feel in any way, we've heard stories about, girls getting to high school, having an interest in the sciences, but getting intimidated with the 4 or 5 geeky boys at the front of the class with their arms permanently up. Did you experience any of that?
That's right. I mean, of course, it's part of it. And my co-founder at Hearsay says, fake it until you make it. And I think that's really helped through those tough times. But I think when you look at students, especially if you look at STEM, you have to start early. People face 2 issues. One is an issue of identity. Do I belong? Do other people who serve as computer scientists or engineers, do they look like me? And that's a tough question. I love what you did with our brochure, because when you go and you do a Google image search for computer scientists, it's all white male. And so that is the societal view of it right now. So there's an issue of my identity. The second issue is getting over these difficult moments, because let's face it, STEM, computer science, it's hard. Operating systems class, compilers class at Stanford, it was hard. And I'm sure it was just as hard for the guys as it was for the girls, but they just didn't show it. And so I think talking about that, providing support, and I love what you did. I mean, Maria should share the story of what the professors now do to those boys in the front who raise their hands and basically dominate the classroom conversation, because I think that completely changes the dynamic and makes it welcoming and accessible for women.
I'll do it with Colin right now. Okay, Colin is in my introductory computer science class, and he's one of those 5 geeky boys who's just raising his hand all the time. And so as the professor, I have a conversation with Colin, just one-on-one, where I go, Colin, I love having you in my class. You are just like so passionate and you know so much, and it's just wonderful to have these.
I am and I do.
Yeah, exactly. And then I say, Colin, I'm sure you don't realize that a lot of the other students think that they're not going to do well in this class because they don't know as much as you. And I'm sure you're not meaning to scare them, but could we just have these conversations one-on-one? Outside of the classroom, like maybe office hours, or maybe you could work on a special project with me, but just in class we could let some of the other students be the ones who get to answer the questions. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm loving that.
And by the way, I have friends who are parents and they have kids, and one child is particularly precocious in programming, and they'll say the same thing. They'll say, well, let's not bucket you as the technical one. Everyone should be technical in this family. And so why don't you let your older or younger brother or sister also participate and not always jump in with the answer to that math question or the programming assignment.
Right, and of course it requires a degree of maturity of the educators and the mentors to be able to have that conversation, which, as we know, is not the easiest thing on the planet to achieve.
That's right, because it's not just one thing. We have to look at each group that's involved, parents, teachers, the students themselves, K-12 versus college, and talk about what each group can do, government.
Were you ever the one with your hand up?
Yeah.
Thought so.
You know that intuitively.
I have an older brother, so I think that taught me to kind of want to be like him and not get intimidated as easily.
But it could have just as easily flipped the other way. And I'm sure we've all seen that as well.
There were moments when I wanted to quit, and I had no idea that I'd end up graduating with the highest GPA in my major.
Yeah.
But I think we're staying away from one of the most basic elements. As long as people view STEM as geeky, and you've got to like math and science, and that's boring, we aren't going to get the majority of our population to learn it.
Right.
We've got to make it exciting. We've got to realize that a lot of the technology coming out applies to every one of us, that we can learn at an early age, and we've got to make it problem solving. Marie, as you alluded to earlier, much as you sit around the family table, my guess is your father made electrical engineering exciting.
He did.
For the table.
Oh yeah, and I had that with my kids as well. We were always building stuff in the garage and attending and showing stuff at Maker Faire. That essence of problem solving takes it away from, as you say, the icky side of the
and
the
that's completely disrupt the education system. If we want to lead as a country with only a little bit over 300 million people, we've got to have the best STEM education in the world. We can't be satisfied within the 20s and think we did great if we get 9.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about Code.org, the organization that Hadi Partovi and his brother Ali started. They started it roughly a year ago, and in full disclosure, I'm on the advisory board, though I'd never met Hadi until the Code conference a couple of months ago. So they managed to get 30 million students, 48% of them female, to spend an hour doing coding activities on their website. That's disruptive. They have 20,000 students using their curriculum already. They got 20 states to change their legislation to recognize computer science as a graduation requirement, mostly in science or math. So, I can't believe how much they got done in a single year. Mm-hmm. And we need more people to support what they're doing, because, if we're going to disrupt education, we've got to find ways to get our children engaged in really loving doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it can't be hope that somebody else does it. We've got to stand up and do it ourselves. I ran a session on the Day of Code, and we ran out of space. We ran out of PCs, we ran out of laptops for the kids to use, which is a high-value problem to have. We were running around the building, ripping machines off people's desks. That was okay. And probably 40% of the attendees for that were young ladies. And that was just phenomenal. And they left with either a revitalized or renewed passion because they saw they were in very good company. Look, I want to do just a couple of questions from the audience, and then come back to the panel for just final thoughts about what things should look like in 5 years' time, and what do we need to have done, what we will have done in order to be able to get there. But are there any? We've got a question over here.
I think this is a terrific discussion, and there's no argument that K through 12 needs to be disrupted. But it is a demographic fact that in OECD countries, the population is aging. I'd like to hear your comments on STEM for retooling and renewing people north of the age of 48 or 50 who were crippled by the crappy education they had in STEM and math and probability.
Maria?
Okay, I think Maria has a few things to say about this.
So, thanks, Michael. While I was at the University of British Columbia, we started a program called Alternate Routes to Computer Science. And the whole idea was to provide, in 2 years, the equivalent of a bachelor's degree in computer science to anyone who had a bachelor's degree in anything. And we had 50-year-old people go through that program. It's still available at UBC. It's, well, of course, if you're not a Canadian resident, it's a little bit more expensive tuition, but it's nothing compared to Harvey Mudd or other relevant places. But it is a 2-year program. It's roughly in 40 to 50% female, and it's hard work. So I don't want to say it's for the weak of heart, but if you're willing to put the effort in, you get real computer science You get math, you get all of the stuff you need to get hired by a Google or a Cisco or a Microsoft or a Facebook.
But do we have Solomon Cons for the AARP set?
No.
Yes. 3 thoughts there. Number one, from a societal perspective, I think that's never been more important. We're entering an era where, we talked about the McAfee-Brynjolfsson book yesterday at dinner, but we're entering an era where a lot of jobs are about to go away in manufacturing, drivers. What are we going to do with that population? And we need to give them the tools to be able to thrive in this big data, machine learning era. So I think, one, we do need to figure that out. I haven't seen anything yet that speaks to that. Number two is, I think any discussion on STEM, we'd be remiss to not talk about immigration. I mean, I have a terrific engineer who works at my company who has to work from home in Israel because of the visa issues, and we all of us can relate to that. So what do we do there? And then number three is, I'll share a story just from my company. We had one of our first customer support reps, Megan, started with us very early on. She realized that a lot of the support calls coming in were relating to the same part of our product that was confusing. And she filed a ticket with engineering, but engineering had a big backlog. Long story short, she taught herself how to program with the help of her colleagues, and now she's one of the highest performers on our engineering team. So it is possible.
This isn't rocket science to fix, but it does take programs that will scale. You could take the concepts of the network academies. Clearly, we can do it $1 million a year. You basically train regardless of generation, and by the way, we found it doesn't matter what gender you are, what color is your skin, what your age is, you learn just as fast. And you train people for where the jobs are, not where they've been. That way you don't have 300 master degree people, 300,000 in the US without a job. You also must match the jobs to the training skills. And that, again, doesn't take huge programming capability, but I think it does take a national initiative, not 47 one-offs, not each of us trying to do our own, invent the wheel. There's more than enough money available to refix this. And to the point you're making, if you're unemployed for 6 months in this country, you become chronically unemployed. And your ability to come back and make a difference in society, never mind the effect on you, your family, and everyone else. So this is something I think should be a national imperative, and we ought to quit doing small steps to turn it around.
So I'll take that. We've got about a minute left to finish off, John. I'll take that if that's okay as your kind of final word on this. Clara, what does it look like in 5 years' time when we are successful with this?
I think it's determined by many of us in this room and beyond. I mean, there's a lot of smart, analytical people here, and this is a conversion funnel. And we lose people, we lose girls, we lose boys at every stage. So let's measure it. And it's not going to be one thing. We have to try everything that's available.
Very good. Maria? You get the final word.
I like what she said.
No, you're not going to cop out on that.
5 years from now, I want Harvey Mudd to be the norm instead of the exception. I want it to be just natural that there are lots of women and African American students and Hispanic students and Asians and white and whatever. And they're all loving learning engineering and learning computer science. And they're loving learning to learn. Because no matter where you go to college today, you're going to have to keep on learning. I mean, the world is changing all the time. And so the best education we can give anyone, the best motivation is it's never too late to learn. So I just want to confess, I have learned to skateboard, to whitewater kayak, and to ski in the last 8 years.
Excellent. Just don't hurt yourself doing anything.
Yeah, I'm very, very uncoordinated. Oh, and I won the Dancing with the Stars ballroom dancing competition too.
Very good. All right, John Chambers, Clara Shih, Maria Klawe, thank you very much.
Thanks, Colin.
Thank you.
Yeah, great to meet you.
Okay, everybody.